Have you ever imagined what happens when someone is humiliated without knowing that they are dealing with the wrong person? Now imagine that this person unknowingly humiliates someone who is the daughter of the school principal himself. And it's not just any humiliation. We're talking about racial humiliation. Something so cruel that, for a second, it makes the listener's soul want to fade away. What would you do in that place? There are times in life when a word, an attitude, a bad joke, or an unjustified offense can change everything. A simple exchange of words can turn someone's life upside down. And that's what happened to Amanda, a girl of just 12 with a shy smile who loved studying and dreamed of becoming a great scientist. A black girl full of dreams and ambitions, but who in those days didn't know that something very painful was about to happen. And worst of all, the person who would cause that pain had no idea who she really was. She didn't know that this girl was the daughter of the school principal, that the humiliation that was about to take place had far greater implications than she could have imagined. What Amanda didn't know was that her father, the school principal, was about to witness a humiliation that he never imagined his daughter would have to go through. And this story of pain, anguish, and surprise will leave you speechless. Before you start this dramatic story, tell me here in the comments which region you're watching from, and I'll leave a heart in your comment. Let's get started. Amanda has always been an intelligent girl, with a sparkle in her eyes and a dream bigger than anything. An only child, she lived with her father, the school principal, and her mother, who always encouraged her to study, believe in her dreams, and never let life's difficulties get to her. But there was one constant challenge that Amanda faced on a daily basis, something she could never have expected, especially in a place that was supposed to be safe for her, school. Ever since she was little, Amanda had experienced a kind of invisible violence, a subtle but devastating kind of attack. It wasn't something she could physically see, but something that was always present in the little things. In the looks, in the comments disguised as jokes, in the exclamations that pretended to be kind but actually hurt deeply. The girl knew that the color of her skin made her the target of cruel stereotypes, which were often ignored by others. When she was younger, she still didn't fully understand what was going on, but over time, her perception of the treatment she received became clearer and clearer. She saw how some classmates avoided her, how the teacher sometimes seemed to ask her more difficult questions, or even how the other students referred to her differently, as if she were something distant, a being who didn't deserve to be treated in the same way as the others. However, Amanda never let these details affect her deeply. She stayed focused on her studies and her goals, trying not to let herself be affected by the sharp words that sometimes came from where she least expected them. When she was at home, in the safety of her own home, the negative thoughts seemed more distant. But all that would change on a simple school day, a day that would start like any other, but would become a milestone in Amanda's life, and not in the way she imagined. It was science class. The teacher, a strict woman known for her authoritative tone of voice and rigid way of conducting lessons, was in front of the class, talking about the impact of science on human development. The lesson seemed to be proceeding within normal parameters, but when it was Amanda's turn to answer a simple question, things took a different turn. Without thinking, the teacher made a comment that stuck in Amanda's mind. "Ah, Amanda, you must know a lot about this. After all, your people have always been very good at these things, haven't they?" The comment was made in an apparently innocent tone, but it was like a sharp blade cutting into the girl's dignity. At the time, Amanda didn't know what to do. There was no anger, no response. She just felt a pressure in her chest, as if the air had become denser, impossible to breathe. As the class watched, no one did anything. Everyone remained silent, and the teacher, unaware of the seriousness of the situation, continued her lesson. But that moment had marked Amanda in a way that she wouldn't be able to erase so easily. That phrase wasn't just an unfortunate joke. It was loaded with contempt and a subtle, but equally cruel prejudice. Worst of all, Amanda knew that the teacher, with all her authority, wouldn't realize what she had done. She didn't know that she was dealing with someone who carried something much bigger inside, something that she would never have imagined would come out. But at that very moment, Amanda felt a deep pain. It was as if she was being discarded there, in that place where she should feel safe, where she should feel valued. Looking at her colleagues, she hoped for some gesture, something to comfort her. But no one dared to intervene. At that moment, Amanda realized that perhaps no one was willing to stand up for her. What she didn't know was that, behind the humiliation, there was something else. Something that, without her realizing it, was about to change everything. Amanda couldn't get the teacher's comment out of her mind. It was like an invisible tattoo that she carried around without being able to erase it. Throughout the day, she found herself distracted. Her focus on her studies was fragmented, and the feeling of humiliation seemed to increase with every step she took through the school corridors. But the worst thing was what was happening inside her head. A storm of thoughts and emotions that she didn't know how to control. How could someone in a position of power be so cruel, so insensitive? And the hardest thing to accept, no one stood up to defend her. The girl felt isolated, as if she were on a silent battlefield, where the rules were determined by whoever was closest to authority, regardless of justice or due respect. When the day finally came to an end, Amanda returned home with a heavy heart. She needed to tell her father, but she didn't know how. He always talked about the importance of dignity, education, and respect. Amanda didn't want to be a burden to him. She didn't want to show weakness. After all, her father, as principal of the school, had always been someone who was admired and respected. How could she tell him about something so painful and personal? However, as she entered the house that had always made her feel welcome, she was greeted by her mother, who immediately noticed the discomfort on her daughter's face. Before Amanda could say anything, her mother asked her what had happened, with the gentleness that only a mother can offer. Amanda, her voice breaking, began to tell her what had happened. Her mother, without hesitation, listened attentively, and when Amanda finished, her face was grave. It wasn't just sadness, but also a growing resentment at the injustice her daughter had suffered. She knew what was at stake. When Amanda mentioned that the teacher had made the unfortunate comment in front of the whole class, something inside her mother changed. She looked at Amanda, now with a new kind of strength in her gaze. "You can't let this go, child." "Not like this," her mother said firmly. It was clear to her that the situation needed to be dealt with, but not in the way Amanda had imagined. The next day, Amanda's father, who was normally a calm and balanced authority figure, was at a meeting outside the school. However, her mother wasted no time. She knew she had to act, and she also knew that the moment required Amanda to become more than a victim. That afternoon, with Amanda by her side, she went to the school without telling anyone. No one expected the situation to take this turn. They arrived and discreetly went to the room where Amanda's teacher was. But what nobody knew was that the teacher, who always seemed so firm and unflappable, had done more than just humiliate Amanda. She had underestimated what that comment could generate. When she heard what had happened, the teacher's reaction was unexpected. It wasn't shame or regret, but an attempt to minimize what had happened, to justify with empty words what she believed to be a simple joke. She didn't understand the seriousness of what she had done, but Amanda and her mother were prepared. What had begun as a simple outburst from a daughter was now about to escalate into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. When the teacher tried to defend herself, Amanda realized, for the first time, the power she herself held in her hands. The simple truth that she no longer needed to hide behind fear, but could use her voice to give weight to her words, was what really changed the course of history. She looked the teacher in the eye with a firm and determined gaze and said, "I am not what you think I am, and my color doesn't define my worth. Don't ever say that to me or to anyone else." It was at that moment that the weight of the situation became clear to everyone, and it was also at that moment that Amanda realized the impact of facing prejudice head-on. She had taken the first step towards breaking a cycle of silence that she had carried for so long. At that moment, the atmosphere in the room seemed to change. The air was heavy, and the tension that had previously been hidden was now overflowing, visible to everyone. The teacher, once so confident, seemed disconcerted by Amanda's sincerity and strength. The young girl, who for so long had felt small in the face of the cruelty of such harsh words, was now raising her head and challenging the authority of those who believed they could humiliate her without consequences. The teacher, who until then had thought that her power in the classroom was absolute, felt for the first time the weight of what her words had caused. Amanda was no longer a silent victim. She was no longer willing to swallow the cruel words she had heard in silence so many times before. But the tension wasn't just in the steely gaze Amanda cast at the teacher. It was in the way her mother, with terrifying calm, positioned herself next to her daughter, making it clear that this battle wasn't just going to be fought between Amanda and the teacher. It was a fight for dignity, for respect, and for equality. Amanda's mother, who until then had been silent, finally spoke up. "It's not just you who's here to teach, teacher. Today, my daughter is here to teach you too. She teaches me every day what it is to be strong, what it is to stand firm, even when the world seems to want to bring you down. Now it's your turn to learn." That sentence echoed around the room and made everyone, including the teacher, understand that the mistake made would not simply be ignored or smoothed over. It wasn't about a simple complaint or an empty apology. It was about a deeper principle, about respecting who the other person is in their essence. And it was when the teacher tried again to justify what she had said that reality hit home even harder. Amanda, with the calm of someone who was finally in control of her own narrative, looked at the teacher and said, without hesitation, "You're not going to diminish me anymore. You will no longer treat my color as something that defines who I am. You will no longer turn my identity into a joke." Amanda's words were like a coup de grace, striking directly at the heart of the situation. She wasn't just defending herself, she was challenging the entire system that allowed such attitudes to continue. And the silence that followed was deafening. The colleagues nearby, who until that moment had watched the scene passively, began to realize the gravity of what was happening. Some even felt ashamed that they hadn't reacted earlier, that they hadn't stood up when Amanda was humiliated. At that moment, Amanda was not just a student, but a representative of all those who had suffered in silence, who did not have the space to express themselves, who had been treated with contempt and disdain. And no matter how much the teacher tried to justify herself, Amanda's words remained engraved in the hearts of everyone present. Amanda was no longer the same. She felt powerful, not because she had done something great, but because she had freed herself from a weight she had been carrying for so long. That conversation in class was no longer just about a mean comment. It was about the courage to be who she really was and not allow anyone, ever again, to erase her identity and her dignity. The moment was filled with emotion, with a strength that no one expected. Change was happening right there, in those simple but powerful words. Amanda was writing her own story, and she knew that from then on, nothing would ever be the same. The silence that filled the room was broken by the sound of quick, but sure footsteps coming from the door. The principal, who had been warned by one of the teachers about what had happened, entered the room with a serious expression. The tension was palpable, but he knew that this was not a time to punish, but to correct. He looked at Amanda, his daughter, and saw her standing with her head held high, stronger than he had ever imagined. There was no shame in her eyes, only an indescribable clarity. He felt a mixture of pride and pain, knowing that his daughter, the girl he had protected all her life, was now facing the world in a way he had never imagined. He looked at the teacher, who was now visibly disconcerted, her shoulders slumped and her hands trembling. Amanda's words, so firm and relentless, echoed in his mind, and he knew that something had to be done. At that moment, the principal took the decision to act, not only on behalf of his daughter, but for all the other students who, over the years, had been victims of similar attitudes. Amanda's case was not isolated, and the school, which had always prided itself on its commitment to education, now needed to show that this commitment extended to everyone, without exception. The teacher was called to a meeting where the situation was carefully analyzed. The school could not tolerate racism, prejudice, or any form of discrimination. And this wasn't just about righting a wrong. It was about ensuring that no one ever felt small or inferior. Amanda, with her defiant and courageous attitude, had not only changed the course of that day, but had unknowingly initiated a profound change in the school. The teacher's attitudes were recognized, and corrective action began to be taken. More than that, Amanda was remembered by her colleagues, who began to approach her, offering support and admiration. What seemed like a moment of humiliation turned into a silent and powerful victory. Amanda finally understood that her strength did not come from avoiding conflict, but from facing it head-on. She was no longer alone, and the school had somehow been forced to look at itself and ask, what does it really mean to educate? Want to see more exciting stories like this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. And for those of you who like a good story and watch to the end, leave your comment. I stayed until the yendi. Remember, the most valuable lessons come from the most difficult moments. See you in the next video.